on his national team roster.
Mhm.
Then we want to talk about Greg Berhalter,
Yes.
and then maybe we'll talk about the Gold Cup.
There you go. All
So,
right.
yeah.
All right. Well, have a good weekend, sir, and I will catch up with you. I'll probably end up seeing you at the big stadium before you go to
Yes.
the Doe on Sunday. So just
Yes.
be safe and stay cool, and I mean that both literally and figuratively.
Cheers, y'all.
All right, Bartimus Prime 19. So this means we do the hot tag. With Bart coming out, Kaylor Hodges is coming in. So,
Howdy, howdy.
first and foremost, sir, since the last time you were on the show, you go ahead and flash for those watching on Twitch. Go ahead and flash that left hand.
Awkward thing. Can't do that.
Oh,
It's getting resized.
okay. So, Kaylor got married, by the way.
Yes.
And he was touring minor league ballparks.
Yep.
And it was, and I give you full credit for going to McCormick Field, Nashville, North Carolina, as you were flashing, as you were flashing all of the places that you and the boss were going to.
Yep.
Although the prices, from what I understand, for going to Asheville tourist games, it's pretty steep in some spots.
So funny enough, so she had lived in the area very recently, and we were planning to go to a game earlier that year, and we had bought tickets when they were super cheap. We had a discount code and everything, and it got rained out, completely canceled. And they said you can redeem these tickets at any time except for the July 3rd, which is their Independence Day.
Right.
So they were like $5 tickets, and we were like, oh, well, guess where we're going to be during the honeymoon? We might as well just use these tickets that we spent $5 on. So yeah, it ended up working out. It's, by the way, if you haven't been to McCormick Field, it is beautiful. And if you want to make it a double day, right up the hill is Asheville City. And so if you want to do a double dip of soccer and baseball all on the same day, it's right there for you.
Yep, and that's key. So UNC Asheville, while their stadium is being renovated right there and carved into the hillside, but Asheville tourists, UNCA, Asheville City, Mystery Soccer Theater 3000, all those folks up there, it's really cool stuff.
Yeah.
What else did you end up doing on the honeymoon? Did you continue touring parks or what?
So we went out to Greenville, which is where we got engaged. So we decided to go up to Greenville and, do all that kind of stuff, all the kind of touristy stuff. But honestly, she was sick as a dog. So we ended up not doing a whole lot, But, there's some things. Hey, if I get to choose to be sick either in my apartment or, in a really nice luxury place to stay, I might as well get the luxury place to stay. And the ring was sized, by the way. It's just the day that I tried it on, my fingers were so swollen, and we didn't realize that. And then when we put it on the day of, it just fell right back off.
Wow.
It was bad.
And I will give you. All right. So since this is rings down here, wedding rings down here, I will show for those on Twitch. I will show. All right. So my ring fingers are right here. There is about a quarter of an inch difference in my ring fingers because of all the sports I played while I was growing up. You get your fingers mashed, from baseballs and basketballs and things. So when we got it measured, I told the boss, I said, measure it here at the knuckle because it's been broken so many times. So that way you can be assured that the ring goes over the knuckle and it stays, because literally, you see this? I mean, for those watching on Twitch, you see how this is not coming off because of how many times this has been broken. It was measured here, and in our ceremony, the boss is literally jamming the wedding ring. Jamming the wedding ring, and you watch the tape. She is literally jamming the wedding ring over the knuckle so where it stays. So literally, this ain't coming off. And so we measured it right there at the knuckle. And so it takes a lot of work. So welcome to the land of wedding rings down here, Kaylor. So congratulations once again.
Thank you.
The reason that we have you on and Morrissey and the rest of the USL show is to talk about USL Championship. And we like
to talk about wedding rings.
Yeah, so we talk about wedding rings. That's absolutely correct. And you got to get Morrissey figured out with all this kind of stuff. But
Yeah.
we have you on to discuss USL Championship the last Thursday of every month. And since we're at the halfway point of the season, what I wanted to do, in addition to looking back at the last month, is look back at the first half of the year. And like we did with Bart Keeler, do a round of red light, yellow light, green light again, but take it from not just the month that haven't seen you, but from the halfway point of the season, and see who your reds and yellows and greens are, who your MVPs are, all of those half season superlatives. I want to kind of get into that as we go here with your visit. So when you look back since our last visit, what has gone on in USL Championship that has really struck you guys at the USL show?
Honestly, this year, what has shocked me anyway has been the amount of coaches fired.
Yeah.
It feels like almost every single week we're getting a new sacking, right? And it's not unusual for coaches to be fired. This is the time of year for them to be fired because teams feel like they're still in it, but enough of the season's gone by to realize that they won't be in it if they stick with the coach any longer. Is that time of year. But there's been a lot of movement this year. Chaplow, I think, was the first one to go out in Orange County. And then a big name that just got fired was, Tab Ramos in Hartford, which a lot of people were very much like, whoa, Tab Ramos, he's going to Hartford. This is a big thing. But I'll be brutally honest. I was never a believer in the project just because, and you can see it if you just look at the box score. Last year, Hartford could score with anybody. They had attacking players, but they had zero defense. And this year, they blew a lot of money on attacking players. They didn't bring in like any defenders. And the defenders they did bring in, God love them, they're a little over the hill. They're not the same defenders that they were. And they've invested all this money on scoring, but they can't defend to save their life. And it was what it was. But that was kind of what stuck out to me so far. It's just been hasn't been a whole lot of coaches and a whole lot of teams that have survived not playing well, other than Las Vegas. Really, everybody's been really proactive this year.
When you look at the standings in and of itself, I mean, legitimately, if you sit there and you're going, okay, fired, and you're kind of looking at Vegas and you're going, man, that was a rough start, not getting a win in your first 10. And then with Hartford being at the bottom of the standings, only winning 2 of their first 16, I want to say 2, 10, and 4 is what sticks in my mind. Traditionally now, in the time that you covered the USL, are we developing quicker firing fingers, or is this just, kind of how things have developed out this year? Is this a developing trend where folks are getting, a little less patient on the roll, or is this just this year that you think?
I don't necessarily think they are becoming more quick to fire, more or less than they are not as patient as they used to be. I think in the past, and I know that sounds like the same thing,
Yeah.
but in the past, I think the USL Championship especially was a real victim of trying to see out the long-term project for too long. I think a lot of clubs just said, no, we will give them the full 3 years, to build this team. When, yeah, a lot of teams you'll see, hey, the roster isn't theirs. They need to get a year in. But when you're seeing a lot of, just toxic locker rooms, and you can tell on the field and you hear the stories coming out from players of this isn't going well in the locker room. This isn't going well in the locker room. A lot of front offices were willing to turn a blind eye this year. They're just being more proactive. And I think a lot of that has to do with there are no MLS2 bottom feeders anymore.
Yeah.
There's no one that's like just holding up the bottom, and people are realizing just how bad their team really is.
When it comes to, how bad things are, obviously Vegas right now 1-8-6 in their first 15. They've lost 4 in a row after they hadn't done anything. They hadn't won in their first 10. They win 1, and now they've lost 4 in a row on the back end of that. They are far and away the team that's hurting the most in the West. We mentioned Hartford in the East. The Miami FC and Anthony Pulis, they have separated.
Mhm.
SC Tulsa, they're at 13 points. They're outside of the playoff zone right now in the Eastern Conference. I think Detroit City has kind of found their way after a rocky start. I mean, Detroit City was hurting early on, and they seem to have kind of found their way, and they're hovering right there with Loudoun at the bottom of the playoff picture in the East. I guess let's just go ahead and get into green light, yellow light, red light. Which direction do you want to start with the league? Where do you want to go? Do you want to go up or do you want to go down?
Let's start a little bit low just so we
Okay.
can end on a high, I
Yeah.
suppose.
All right. So
Um,
then let's go with your red lights. Who are they?
yeah, red lights, I mean, it's Tulsa and Miami right
Okay.
now. Just to kind of give a little bit of context, I suppose. You mentioned Las Vegas and how bad their record is, but if you actually watch, they're a lot more competitive than you think, right? They are constantly in matches. They've had a really tough season, like just strength of schedule this season. So I don't think their record is truly indicative of how good they actually are. Don't get me wrong, I don't think they're good, but I don't think they're as bad as their record says.
Right.
Meanwhile, Tulsa, they have shed players, they have traded players, they
Right.
have brought in players that have done nothing. And a lot of their signings preseason that I adored them for, like Levis, who they sent over to Detroit City for Tommy McCabe,
Mm-hmm.
it made no sense to me because Levis has the chance to be a real deal all USL left back, and it doesn't make sense. As for Miami, I have been red light on them since they've joined the league because they constantly have talent. I mean, if you look at their roster, I think you can make a real deal argument that they have the best roster in the East, and they've done nothing with it. I have been out on Miami for a long time now, and I just kept saying I will not believe it until they force me to believe it. And 3 years now, I have not been forced to believe anything besides they will be disappointing.
When you look at Tulsa, I mean, a lot of folks were wondering about the Rodrigo Philip Goodrum trade, and everybody was like, "Ooh, okay," and it just it has benefited Memphis 901 no end, and Philip Goodrum in Tulsa. I think Philip Goodrum has gone into a black hole in Tulsa.
Yep.
It's like he has disappeared and gone off the map after the tail end of this trade now.
You say that, but he's actually been more productive in Tulsa than he was in Memphis.
Okay.
It's just I'm not saying that means he's better there. I just mean this is how bad he's been.
Yeah.
Out of the entire USL, I mean, Philip Goodrum leads the USL in touches in the penalty box, and he has what 3 goals, 2 of them penalties.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he has not been productive at all. Um, he is meanwhile, you're looking at Rodrigo da Costa and this Memphis team, which has an all-flying, attack right now. He's leading, like he's all world right now in just having assists. You think he's the goal scorer because that's what he was forced to be in Tulsa, but that's because nobody in Tulsa was really doing anything. But now that he can sit back, play a true number 10, distribute the ball, and score when he has to, I think it really shows that Tulsa thought they had a scoring problem when they just have an attacking problem. They don't have anybody to pass the ball. They don't have anybody to score the ball. They brought in someone who can score the ball, but they still don't have anybody to pass the ball. Meanwhile, they had DaCosta, and DaCosta was scoring the ball a little bit. He was really doing well in creating chances, but again, no one was there to finish it. I just think that Tulsa came in with this vision of what their players were without truly understanding the players that they had.
All right. So yellow light for USL Championship. And what we do once again, yellow light can either be trending from red toward green. It can be trending from green toward red. Either way applies, and you can have a repeat answer from the month before. It just has to be a different reason.
I think this one's a weird one. This is a yellow light, and I don't really know where they're trending. I think they're just yellow.
Mm-hmm.
It's Louisville City.
Okay.
And it's really not that they're bad, but they're not as good as you think of. I mean, for people who don't follow the USL, you hear Louisville City. This is a team that has never missed the Eastern Conference Championship since their inception, and they're in fifth
Yeah.
right now. And it's not a tough run of form or whatever at fifth. It's their defense is awful fifth, and they've had some pretty good goalkeeping play out of them. But their defense is a revolving door, and people will say, well, it's because that Joshua Winder guy that gets sold for $1 million to Benfica. That's obviously why he hasn't been playing if he's going to Benfica, right? But even when he was playing, it wasn't good. I like to sing the praises of the USL, but I don't know why he was the $1 million man. I don't think he's worth that. But even so, I mean, Louisville has players. They have a good team. Their midfield can play with the best of them, but their back line, which has been a strength for them in the past, I mean, you can make conversations. They are the best, one of the best back lines. It just isn't working. As for a team that's kind of trending, again, another firmly, I don't know where they are kind of yellow is Phoenix Rising.
Wow.
Phoenix, last year, they were bad.
Mhm.
I don't think there's any guess out of that. They are bad. And they are kind of figuring it out. They've brought in guys that are more proactive. I think one thing this year that you would see last year and this year is that they didn't have a whole lot of players that were really proactive in the attack. They were not a slow build-up team, but they like to build up. Meanwhile, they bring in Armanakis from Loudon, and they already have Danny Trejo this year, who makes way from Light slash LAFC. And they are two of the top 5 players in making progressive runs, advanced runs, right? And so there's constantly poking and prodding at this back line. They're constantly, doing things. And even so, Ortega is the guy that's scoring all the goals for them. And if they can find someone, whether it be Armanakis finally getting on the end of it, or if it is, Danny Trejo finally putting some goals there, I think they could be trending up. But right now, all the pressure is on Ortega, and if he scores, they win. If they don't score, it's a draw or a heavy loss.
All right. So then your green light, Kaylor Hodges hanging out with us at Kaylor Hodges at the USL, big USL show for their monthly visit here on SDH to break down everything in USL Championship. So green light, who are your green lights right now?
I mean, you'd be remiss to not just say Pittsburgh outright right now.
Bob Lilly would scream at you otherwise.
Yeah, I mean, he'll probably do that anyway. 45 minutes, lights turned off in the stadium, still screaming at me.
Been there.
Bob, I mean, this is a team that I had zero faith coming into this year, and they've proved me wrong because Lily Ball does Lily Ball things. They just constantly do it. I do think that they are an injury away from seeing their form fall off. And we'll talk about that in a little bit if we talk about the midseason awards, if we end up doing that still. But, and I'll save that a little bit. But if I want to look out at the West, look, Sacramento Republic sitting at the top, Monterey Bay is there, but I'm in love with this El Paso team. Full on green light. They were a team that I thought would be really competing for a wooden spoon award this year. I thought that's who they were. Okay. Because, I mean, they bring in a coach that had one of the worst seasons in the Swedish first division ever, after having one of the worst seasons I've ever watched of a USL team. And this year, they do it. This is coming after Lowry is in Indy. They lose Hutchinson. They made him go away. Yes. And then they bring in a guy that looks like the worst hire out of any of them. And what he did was, I mean, he gave him the Bill Clinton special, not that one, which is which is keep it simple, stupid. Like, he He's simplified everything. Instead of this crazy diamond narrow formation and, hey, we're going to play with this intense sweeper keeper and we're going to hold possession, he went with the 4-4 effing 2. And we are just going to build it like a normal team. Let's go back to when you were 8.
Mm-hmm.
And it looks so much better.
All right. So since it is the midway point of the season, and I know that I've had you do a little homework, your mid-season superlatives. I feel like we're breaking open the at USL show yearbook here. So all right. So superlatives here, senior superlatives and mid-season superlatives for USL. So what categories do you have so we can break them down? How did you break down your categories here?
So, I mean, you have to have an MVP.
Okay.
MVPs kind of have to be up there somewhere.
Right.
I don't like doing the Golden Glove award. I just like to call best goalkeeper because they're normally not the same thing.
Got it.
And I think the one that has, I'm going to call it the most likely to improve.
Okay.
Those are kind of the 3 that I decided to go with because, I mean, you have your top of the top and then you have your good goalkeepers, and you have which is the team that really could be on the rise. Those are the kind of the ones that I was looking at.
All right, so then let's work our way from the bottom to the top. The most likely to improve in the second half of the season is whom?
Just kind of with the talent that they have, with who they are as a team, and you kind of already hinted at it. Detroit City.
Mm-hmm.
They have already started turning around a little bit. They have a defense that can play with anyone. They're not going to be blown out. They're just not. That back line is ridiculous. And they're starting to get a little bit of goal scoring now. I think we talked about Levis, right? And the thing that he brings into that left back side is that they actually have a left back now. And I think that ability to actually play down the wings, which they haven't been able to truly do throughout this year, I think that's going to bring in more service into the box. And while I don't think they're going to be true title contenders this year, I do think that they're going to ruin somebody's season in the playoffs. And that's a big jump from where they were, which when they were really competing for that wooden spoon.
No doubt about it. All right, so we're not going to give Golden Glove, but best keeper. Who is best keeper of the first half for you?
Paul Blanchett. I've talked about him before. Oakland roots. He's the guy. If you look at how many goals they've given up, you would say there's no world where he is winning, this best goalkeeper award.
Right.
He has been under insane pressure this year. The thing that I like to go to, and it's kind of hard to see on most of the stats or whatever, it's not XG. I like to just see like what is a competitive XG, right? They're how many shots is he actually facing, right? And in the game that they just played yesterday, he conceded 2 goals. Well, as in terms of shots on target, they expected him to concede 3. That's not even considering the shots that were off target and the shooting gallery his backline's putting on him. Oakland, I don't think there's only been 2 games this year where he has underperformed his XG, which that's ridiculous to say. And on top of that, his distribution's been pretty good. He has done a really good job at like just getting his wings involved. He's been doing a good job of being a real forward presence.
Mm-hmm.
I think you would also, if you want to say the best goalkeeper, I think you could also look at Nate Steinwasser because he is just a big time player. But right now, I'm fully going with Paul Blanchett.
All right, so then who is your first half MVP?
Dikwa, Albert Dikwa. He has been a one-man scoring machine for Pittsburgh.
Mm-hmm.
And I think for me, this is a personal bias thing. It says a lot whenever I'm giving an attacker the MVP because I love to just say the back line and your goalkeeper are more important than the guys who score goals because normally you have multiple guys scoring goals if you're good. I mean, this has been Dikwa's year. He has been ridiculous. He's tied at the top for, your golden boot. And the next closest guys are Kiza and Shonumi.
Mm-hmm.
And those guys both just had 2 goals. It's the Dikwa show. And without him, I don't think this Pittsburgh team is in conversation of being the best team in the USL. And he is carrying that offense. And luckily behind him, he has an insane defense that can bail him out if he doesn't score.
Yeah.
But he is turning 1 point into 3 points on a weekly basis.
And Bob Lilly will yell at him if he doesn't. So
Yes, he's in fear.
Yes. Pittsburgh's unbeaten in their last 5, by the way, at 8-2-6. 2 points clear. But this is the interesting part of this to me, is that you look at the conferences, and right now you mentioned where Lou City's hanging out in 5th. They are 25 points. They're 5 points out of first. But 1 through 4 are separated right now by only 2 points. Pittsburgh's at 30, and then you've got Charleston Battery, who've turned things around with Ben Pierman. You've got Memphis 901, who's at 28 points. Matches in hand, 2, if not 3, with the folks above them. And then you've got Tampa Bay, who got off to an awful start, and they have swung things back around to where they're at 28 points. So you look at the East, and I think the East is developing into a street fight. Where you look at the West, you mentioned El Paso, and Sacramento is right now 32 points, averaging 2 points a match right now through their first 16. Sacramento and El Paso are trying to give themselves a little bit of distance, because then you get into the street fight for the rest of the playoff spaces. And if the playoffs started today, which they're not, but still, Monterey Bay to Phoenix, 3 through 8, separated by 4 points right now in the Western Conference. Monterey Bay's at 26, unbeaten in their last 5. They've won 4 in a row. San Antonio being San Antonio. Oakland, you mentioned Blanchette. San Diego Loyal, a little lower than what we're used to seeing out of Loyal right now at 23 points. Switchbacks had an awful string about a month and a half ago, and they've kind of rebounded from that a little bit. They're at 22, and Phoenix Rising's at 22. So it's like the races at the top are chasing the top in the East, and the races after 1 and 2 in the West, where everybody's trying to climb over each other to stay in the playoff picture. It's interesting races coming at it from different places.
This is the same thing that happened last year. Funny enough, I mean, this is the one thing where the USL is weirdly consistent. If you look at the final day last year, the final home playoff spots in the East were up for grabs. We had no idea where people would be finishing. Meanwhile, the West, you're like, other than, you have yours, think it was San Diego and San Antonio last year.
Yeah.
Other than those teams that you said, they're going to finish first and second, you had no idea what was going to happen in the West. And that was just kind of how it was going. And it's weirdly consistent that it stayed like that this year. I think what you're seeing, and this is kind of the truth from last year as well, is that in the East, your talent is at the top. You know who your talent is, and then the drop off is huge. I don't think it's as big this year because, I mean, this is me having a little bit of homerism, a little bit of bias, right? But I think 1 through 6 in the East are where your talent is, and then after that, you're seeing a big drop off. Meanwhile, in the West, I think you can see your top, I guess you could call it top 4, but not a lot of people, I think, would really give the benefit of the doubt to Monterey, even though I am all the way in on what they're doing.
Right.
But if you want to be that person, your 5 through 10, it's about as close as it gets. And if you're really thinking about talent, I know there's going to be some loyal fans or whatever saying, "Nuh-uh, we're not the same as Orange County." According to your points, you're closer to them than Sacramento. And I think that's what we're kind of looking at right now, is that the top is pretty defined in the East, and then the drop off is big. Meanwhile, the top is really defined in the West, but the rest is just a bloodbath.
All right, 2-minute warning, and I'll ask you a local question. What's going on with Legion right now? They had that losing streak in the middle. They've kind of shaken it off a little bit. They've won 2 in a row. What's going on there that you've been keeping an eye on for your home team? And I mean that home, meaning where you're based. What's going on there with Legion? They look like they're trying to turn it around.
Yeah, so in May, you mentioned that. So other than the 2 US Open Cup wins, they went completely defeated in May, not picking up a single point. And a lot of that comes down to, when I talked to Tommy Sohn about this, he was very blunt about it. I was like, what's the difference between May and June? And he said, we have trained for the first time in a month. Because for people who don't realize, they played over 800 minutes in 21 days.
Yep.
When they weren't playing, they were on a flight out somewhere else. They just didn't have a chance to rest. I think that's been a big difference is that they've actually had time to train this year, or this month. As for this upcoming matches, I mean, that doesn't get any more important than it will. This is the most important stretch of the season, and I don't want to speak too hyperbole there. They're playing the defending champions in San Antonio, who, yes, they'll be without Jordan Farr, but they're also really freaking good at soccer. Then they're playing Las Vegas, which, like I said, they're better than their record says, and they're going to be a harder task than I think a lot of fans will give them credit for. Then you have Tampa Bay, Charleston, Louisville City. Everybody's sitting above you, and you can go above them if you win. And I think that that kind of hyper focus on trying to get those wins in a stretch like that really bodes well for this team, especially when you look at the US Open Cup run. If they can just treat this as a mini tournament for themselves, I think that kind of mentality could get them a lot of points that I think a lot of fans wouldn't be expecting.
All right, hit the promo for me. What do folks need to know about what's going on at the USL show?
Look, the USL show is doing a lot of fun stuff right now. We have our kit show, which if you're big into soccer fashion, we have that going. So check out Kit Season. That one, there's a new episode that should be going up either today or tomorrow. I don't remember which day I decided to upload it. Look, except for this upcoming Tuesday, because July 4th, we have a show every single Tuesday. And we have a whole lot of more, I guess, like wacky show ideas. Not really wacky. It's just more than recap. Like just recently, we did Down But Not Out, which is we gave every single team outside the playoffs a reason why they should still believe in their team. So if you want to hear about the teams that are not just sitting at the top riding high and get to know a little bit more about the quote unquote bottom feeders, that's the kind of show for you. And we're going to have more stuff like that on the way.
Looking forward to it. At Kaylor Hodges at the USL show. And if you don't follow John Morrissey because of what he does in breaking down USL tactics, fantastic follow as well. Kaylor, thanks again for hanging out with us and breaking everything down in the USL Championship. We'll keep an eye on you guys, and we'll catch up with you guys again this time next month.
Thanks for having me.
All right, Kaylor Hodges with the USL show. He's going to go get caffeine and wake up. You know, being a newlywed, you know, he's all over the place. And Kaylor and John and the guys at the USL show do fantastic work. If you want to follow along, even though with our review preview stuff that we do with Championship and League One, we do kind of break things down that way. But if you're looking for the in-depth material, then it is catching up with the guys at the USL show, USL Tactics, and all that kind of stuff. So it's always great to have them hanging out and being a part of things here at SDH once a month, so we can all get gassed up and ready to go and figure out what's going on when it comes to the sprint for the playoffs, who's in, who's out, the race, everybody here, everybody doing this, everybody doing that. So it's very, very cool. And thanks to Kaylor and the guys for hanging out with us as they do. Waiting for Nico Moreno to come on, and it'll be Thursdays with Nico, where Nico breaks down everything from the Pacific perspective. And it will be with Nico. We'll look at Major League Soccer. We'll look at Gold Cup. We'll look at Mexico. Is El Tri back? We'll get his thoughts on everything that's been going on in and around the world of soccer. And then after that, like I said, we still haven't hit any of the news of the morning, short of the new head coach announcement in Miami. And we'll get into that with Nico as well. But there's like transfer news and plenty of other stuff going on, gossip, rumor, innuendo, things to watch, things to view, all that kind of stuff while we're thinking about it. Here's your soccer for today. El Modaflo mentioned Copa Libertadores. That's on beIN and beIN in Espanol. You can catch the doubleheader at 6 and 8:30. Boca Juniors and Monagas is at 6. Palmeiras and Bolivar is at 8:30. If you don't have beIN, you can sign up for beIN at Fanatis, fntz.co/soccer down here. It helps out the show, and it helps you out in watching a lot of things that are going on in and around the world of soccer. They give you beIN. It's for the fans. It's Gold TV. It's Teise. All of that stuff. Look at Fanatis. You can watch everything from the African continent over here to Libertadores and such. You can catch that at Fanatis, fntz.co/soccer down here. FS1 Gold Cup doubleheader. The country that hosted the last World Championship is playing Honduras at 7:45. Haiti and Mexico is at 10 o'clock. Tuda NA has your simulcast, as does Univision. There's one match in Apple TV and MLS Next Pro tonight on Season Pass.